Hello and welcome to the Strong, Healthy, Happy podcast. My name is Debra. I'm here today to talk all about making mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's part of being human. And I want this podcast to be something that's really helpful for you and reassuring that we all make mistakes. We all do things we might later regret. You're not alone. You're not broken. And on this podcast, I'm going to share with you some helpful strategies to help you move past the mistakes that you make, recognize why they might happen, and some tips and strategies about what you could do differently should they occur to help reduce the likelihood of them happening again and be able to show up in a way that makes you feel good. And I also want to talk about how progress isn't linear. We may think that we make progress in a straight line to the direction we want to go, but often we hit bumps along the road. It might set us back sometimes. Sometimes we, come across challenging situations, like I say, bumps in the road, and recognizing that progress isn't linear is going to be really helpful to you. I also want you to be able to show up during this period of time. We're a week away from Christmas. I want you to be able to show up in a way that helps you to feel good. And whether it's Christmas or any other time of the year, you will be able to apply what you learned from this podcast episode to any situation, any mistake, any bump in the road that you may come across. Now, I also want to help you be able to better respond to the mistakes that you might make. And when I say mistakes, bearing in mind I'm an online coach and women's health is my passion, helping women achieve their goals, whatever their goal, whether it be weight loss, whether it be just overall health, whether it be strength, whether it be performance goals, no matter the goals, we all make mistakes along the way. It might be with food, it might be with drink, it might be with different situations, and the way we act may not always align with our goal. And I want to help you be able to better respond to them and learn from them. Before I do that, I want you to think about the point that you've got to right now and to recognize where you are right now and perhaps the effort that you've been putting in this past year or past few months or even past few weeks. However long, could be years, however long you've been focusing on your health goals, whether it's weight loss, like I say, whether it's getting stronger, whatever it is, recognize the effort that you've been putting in. And recognize that you've been mindful and you've probably made progress and you're feeling reasonably good for it. And then we hit December and things get challenging. It is a particularly challenging time of the year, not just with the weather and the cold weather, the damp weather, the dark nights, dark mornings. Things get much harder for us to show up in a way. And I've done podcasts on winter challenges, which you can listen to if you haven't already listened to them. You also might be busier at work, yeah, especially if you're taking some time off or you're closing for Christmas. Everything compounds because you've got to get it done before you take your time off. You're also, if you've got children, really busy parenting because kids have got all their Christmas things and end of term and everything they've got going on. You've got pressures, your Christmas shopping. You're also socializing. It's probably increased from the normal amount of socials that you have. You're probably exposed to a lot more high calorie, highly palatable and delicious foods. You may be going for more meals out, social events, drinks, nibbles, meals prepared by others, and you may be feeling a lack of control about all the occasions that you've got in your diary. You may eat more than planned. You may drink more alcohol than you usually would. And you're finding it much more challenging to make those mindful choices or show up in a way that you had intended, or perhaps you'd planned, but it didn't quite go to plan. And it all becomes very, very challenging. Now, if this resonates with you and you can think of an instance that's happened maybe recently, I want to reassure you that, first of all, we are all human. And as human beings, we all make mistakes. And I can assure you that I've made plenty of my own mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes. And this is really key. And this is one of the things that I'm going to be talking about. Before I go on to that, the first thing I want to say is that when you hit a bump in the road, when you make a mistake, when you act in a way that really doesn't align with how you want to feel, and you're like, why did I do that? The first thing you need to do is think about the way that you spoke to yourself. So if you can think back to a certain situation where you hit a bump in the road, you acted in a way that didn't align with you, and you didn't feel good. How did you speak to yourself? Was it negative? Did you berate yourself? Did you tell yourself off? Were you pissed off with yourself? Did you feel disappointed in yourself? Did you talk really negatively to yourself? Because this is often what people default to doing. I know with a lot of my clients, I know with my past self, that is what I would do to myself. And what I've learned over the years of working on my own relationship with food, showing up for myself in a way that feels good, from my coaching experience, from speaking to many women, it's really easy to slip into this negative self-talk, but also recognizing that talking to yourself from a negative place is not the way that you're going to make change. It might feel like that's what you want to do, but actually you're not going to make long-term change from berating yourself and getting annoyed at yourself. It won't reduce the likelihood of the bump in the road happening again. The way that you reduce the likelihood of it happening again is actually by talking to yourself a bit kinder, with more compassion, and speaking to yourself more from a positive place. So reframe your negative self-talk with more positive self-talk. And if you did hit a bump in the road, maybe previously you would have hit that bump multiple times by now, but actually it's only happened once. That's really positive because you've reduced these incidences happening, whatever they might be. Relate it to yourself. Speaking to yourself from a place of positivity and self-care is how we make change, is how we reduce the likelihood of it happening again. And if you imagine, you had someone you care about, perhaps a best friend, who did something that didn't align with the way, maybe they overate and they feel really shitty about it, and they tell you about it, and they hate themselves and they want to hate themselves into change, and they start placing restriction on themselves and everything's very negative. How would you speak to your friend? And would you speak to yourself in the same way that you would speak to your friend? Because it does need to be the same way that you would speak to your friend. And I bet you wouldn't berate your friend. You wouldn't make her feel bad. You wouldn't tell her you were really disappointed in her. You would treat her with a lot more kindness, and you would look at the positives in her situation. This is the way that you need to speak to yourself. And it comes under self-compassion. And self-compassion is where you have your best interests at heart and you treat yourself with kindness and with understanding. Now, don't get me wrong, compassion can look different at different times. Sometimes compassion can be mistaken for being soft. Sometimes that might be the right approach that you need. And sometimes it might be hot bubble baths and Netflix and a lay on the sofa. And sometimes self-compassion can mean telling yourself, get your bum off the sofa and go out for that walk, because that walk is going to make you feel so much better. And there's nothing better than fresh air and movement to help make you feel better. So no, you're not sitting on the sofa. You are going out for the walk because it's in your best interests. So don't mistake self-compassion for being soft. Self-compassion can look different. But self-compassion is you showing yourself positivity. Self-compassion is you showing yourself that you care about yourself. Self-compassion is self-respect. And doing things that respect yourself is going to lead to positive change. Doing things that are negative is not going to promote that change. You also want to think about reflection. So reflection is where you think about the bump, the mistake, whatever happened, the way you acted. You reflect on it and you really think about it. Now, I often hear from clients, and again, any people I speak to, I'm going to draw a line and move on, is after an incident that might happen. And yes, you do want to draw a line and move on. But before you draw that line and move on, you want to go through give yourself a little bit of time to self-reflect. What happened? How did you make that mistake? How did you, or why did you act in a way that didn't align with you? What was the circumstances? What led to it? Were you emotional? Were you stressed? What were you feeling at that time? And did you use food as a coping mechanism because it helped you cope? It gave you that dopamine hit and it made you feel good in that moment, very short term, because it is a short term fix. Think about the circumstances that led to that situation. Think about the reason why you maybe seeked comfort in food or whatever the relevant bump in the road was to you. Go through that period of reflection and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Because this is how we always learn forwards. We never fail. We always learn forwards. And I don't even like to call it failing forwards. I like to call it learning forwards because it's much more positive and it's a reframe that we learn forwards. And you know what? If you learn from your mistakes, it was a valuable mistake. It was worth making because you've learned from it and you've understood why it happened. And you're going to think about why that happened. And if you're feeling those feelings or you were feeling stressed or emotional, really think about and name the feelings that you were feeling. Often we seek comfort from food. And don't get me wrong, food can give us comfort. There are times that food is the comforter that we need. But the problem is when food is your only source of comfort and it's what you immediately turn to without actually taking that momentary pause to ask yourself, what is it that I need? What is it that I'm feeling? Why am I reaching for the food? What is it? You might be feeling tired, lonely, angry, sad, stressed, your boss has pissed you off, your husband's annoyed you. Like, what is it that you're feeling? And name it and recognize it and acknowledge it. And then think about how you can soothe yourself outside of food. Maybe creating what I call a self-soothe list is going to really help you, because a self-soothe list is where you list other coping mechanisms that aren't just about reaching for food, because often it's our default setting and we want to break that default setting because it's not making you feel good. So we want to create other ways to self-soothe us. It could be taking some deep breaths. It could be putting your hand on your skin, on your chest, and getting that skin to skin contact that will help bring you back in that present moment and will stop you doing that reactionary behavior of reaching for food or another glass of wine or whatever it might be. What is it that you need? What are the coping mechanisms? Could it be the hot bubble bath? Could it be the walk? Could it be calling a friend? Could it be cuddling your pet? For me, cuddling my dog always self-soothes me. So think about what you could do. My clients make self-soothe lists and they all have different things on their list dependent on what they like to do. Some people like to do jigsaw puzzles. Some people like to do coloring. Some people just like to remove themselves from the area and do a bit of body movement. Depending where you are, you want to be able to implement your self-soothe list. And if you're out and about, you're not going to be moving your body and starting to do some yoga or exercise, but you can do some deep breaths. You can give yourself that pause to think about what is it that I need and how am I feeling and what would help me to feel better. So if you hit a bump in the road, if you make a mistake, know that you're human. Think about how you speak to yourself. Meet yourself with compassion. Reflect on the situation. Understand the circumstances. Understand the way that you were feeling and name your feelings. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Also ask yourself, what would I do differently next time if you were faced in a similar situation or similar circumstances? They don't have to be the same circumstances, but what would you do differently next time? And how can you better support yourself, i.e. with your self-soothe list? This is going to really help you respond with logic and calmness to any bumps in the road that you may hit, or actually reduce the likelihood of those bumps in the road happening. If you react impulsively, they tend to be the things that don't help you long term. They may give you temporary relief, short-term relief, but they're not going to help you long term. And those reactions don't leave you feeling very good in yourself. And I don't want anyone, clients, friends, family, or anyone, any of you listeners, feeling that way. It's not a nice way to feel. And when you learn to respond in a much more calm and mindful way, you will be able to reduce the likelihood of these bumps and mistakes happening, and you will be able to cope better. So I hope you found that helpful. Now, also to help you, I want you to think about this time of year and be really, really realistic with your health goals, because they may change. You may have been working really hard towards a weight loss goal, but actually Christmas is round the corner. You want to fully engage in Christmas activities. You want to spend time with family and friends. You don't want to be distracted about calories, food, nutrition, things that take you away from being fully present. And it might be that you let go of your weight loss goal. It doesn't mean that you're letting go completely. It doesn't mean that you're diving into the box of Quality Street and anything you can get your hands on. It just means that you're recognizing that your expectations of yourself have changed. And as a result of realigning your expectations, the way that you show up, the way that you behave, the actions that you take are all going to change alongside it. And it will set you up for greater success rather than trying to do something that is really unrealistic at this time of year. Now, changing your health goals doesn't mean that your health isn't important. It doesn't mean that your health doesn't matter. Your health goals do matter to you, and changing your goal doesn't mean that you have to have this all or nothing approach. Well, if I can't do what I was doing before, if I can't get to the gym 3 times a week and do everything I was doing prior to December or Christmas, then what's the point? Because that's you throwing your dummy out the pram. That's you in an all or nothing mentality. And that all or nothing mentality won't help you at any time of the year, because it means you're either on or off. And every time you're on, yes, you may make progress, but every time you're off, you're taking steps further away from where you want to be than if you took the approach, I'm going to do the best I can. May not be perfect, but I don't need to be perfect. I just need to do the best I can, and I need to do these things consistently. They may look different to what I was doing at the earlier on in this year, or perhaps last week, but I recognize that my expectations of myself have changed. I want to show up differently around Christmas. I want to be more present with family and friends. I want to fully engage. I don't want to be overly consumed about my body, my weight, my health. I want to be with friends and family. And even if I gain a few pounds, it might be worth it to be able to fully engage and be present and relax and enjoy yourself. Now, that doesn't mean the gloves are off. It doesn't mean I'm saying, throw your health goals away. Who cares? It's Christmas. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, come away from the all or nothing mentality. You can meet yourself somewhere in the middle. You can do the best you can. It is still worth going for the walk, even if you ate some chocolate. It is still worth going to the gym, even though you're not on a weight loss goal. These things are still worth doing because they change the way that you feel. And the way that you feel has a knock-on effect to other positive actions you take throughout the day that make you feel good. And if you've been following me and you've been listening to my podcast for a while, I'm all about feeling good, because when you feel good, you show up for yourself better. You feel better. You're better for the people around you. Nobody wants someone feeling miserable, bloated, regretful, negative. I want you to be feeling good, no matter how your feeling good looks for you at a particular time. Don't let one mistake or one bump in the road have a knock-on effect to the rest of your day. One bump in the road, it's not the bump in the road that's the issue. It's the way that you react after, and then you let the rest of the day, go to ruin. And then the next day, and it might take you a whole week to get back to it, or you'll be going, oh, I'll worry about it in January. And you get to January and you feel awful. So don't let one mistake roll into one. Don't have the all or nothing approach. Recognize that your health goals may have changed. Think about the strategies I've given you earlier on in this podcast about how you speak to yourself, about the reflection, about asking yourself what you could learn from the situation, what you would do differently, how you can better support yourself, and recognize that the way you feel and how you like to feel is really important to you, whether you're making progress or not. We've established progress isn't linear. Sometimes you're really making progress and sometimes it slows down. Sometimes you may go a couple of steps back. That's okay. We just don't want to sack the whole lot off. It's still worth it. Do the things that make you feel good this Christmas. Be fully present. No need to be overly focused with food. Reset your expectations and your goals during this period of time. Enjoy your social occasions. Doesn't mean the gloves are off. It doesn't mean that you're not caring about yourself. Your self-respect, your self-compassion are still a priority at this time of the year. They just may look a little bit different to how they look at other times. Do the things that make you feel good. And I hope that this podcast has really resonated with you and gives you the tools to go forwards and enjoy yourself, but not give up on yourself. Before I sign off, if you're not already following or subscribed to my podcast, please go and subscribe. Share me with your friends. You may have friends who are struggling and you think that their friends won't benefit from this podcast. If you're benefiting from this podcast and all my other episodes, so will your friends. Share me in your WhatsApp group. Link them to my podcast. Share me on your social media. Give me a 5-star rating and leave me a review. And the reason why that helps is not because I just want you to tell me how wonderful I am. It's because it brings my podcast to the attention of other women. And this is what I want, is to reach and help other women. So if you can do one thing for me this Christmas, please go and do one of those things or all of those things. Thank you for joining me. And I want to just finish off really quickly by saying, look out for next week's episode. And if you've subscribed or followed, you will see that it gets released. I have one of my clients called Hannah on the podcast, and she's talking about her coaching experience, what she's lost and what she's gained. She is incredible, and I don't want you to miss out on that episode. Thank you for joining me.